So, I've titled this Response and Ripples, and you'll find out as we go through why that is. And soon we get a little image up. Wonderful. Response and ripples. So as a kid, I used to go fishing with my dad, and on a pond, I tried to capture some of his excitement for fishing, and I struggled many a time. You see, I was the one full of energy, and he just sat by the pond and fished, and there was I struggling to find his passion there. You see, I can't remember about much of the fish I caught, and I probably didn't catch much. Everything kept falling into the pond or something. But I do remember the wildlife, because if you knew my dad, he would like to go in the dawn, right in the morning, before the sun got up. So I used to travel with him, and we'd go there when it's dark. So from the forest came the rabbits and the deers and the birds. You can imagine how exciting it was trying to look at all the wildlife there. And I can remember those cold, misty mornings when there was just silence across the pond, and those reeds were blowing in the breeze, and we just watched and listened, watching and listening for any movement there was, because we knew there was much activity going on underneath the pond, but we were waiting for that float to flicker. And in those days there, when I was sitting with him, you could hear the start of the rain. So when you heard the raindrops splashing, your eyes scanned the pond to try and see those raindrops. You couldn't see the raindrops. You heard them at first. And as soon as you heard the raindrops, splash, splash, you started to see the ripples. And the more rain that came, the more ripples they were. And soon the ripples would overflow and overlap. And the whole of the pond became an excitement of activity. So not only was there activity under the pond, there became an immense activity on the top of the pond. You see, one raindrop starts to spread, and the ripples form. Then the ripples overlap, and it breaks the silence. And when it breaks the silence, it transforms that pond into wild activity. And we're looking at today one response to Jesus. Reaches out to that community, overlaps with many other people who love Jesus. And it breaks into the ordinary life and transforms communities. So we're going to be looking at Lydia. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at this wonderful lady, Lydia. And from the Bible passage here, we read that she's successful, she's got a good reputation, and it says that she's a worshipper of God. Wow, she seems to be an amazing lady, doesn't she? So she's successful. She's a dealer in purple cloth, and in those days, the purple cloth was the most expensive commodity in the Roman times there. It was more expensive than gold. And she used to be this dealer. So she used to deal the cloth to the kings and those all important people that could afford it. And here we see her having her own house. Now, not many would have their own house, and maybe she dealt her cloth from the front of the house. But it says that Paul gathered at her house, that the brothers and sisters in Christ gathered there. So it's a pretty large house. She was an owner. She was wealthy. She had a fantastic reputation. If you were a dealer, you knew the right people. And to do well in your business means you had respect in the community. But interestingly, it says here that she was a worshipper of God. That means she was a God-fearing Gentile. Someone who prayed, someone who went to the synagogue, who had probably a rhythm of prayer in her life. And she knew the Hebrew scriptures. But for a synagogue to take place, it needed 10 men, a minimum of 10 men. So when it says here in the passage that Paul went out to a place of prayer, it was probably because it was mostly women gathering there. So here we see her. She had it all. This woman, Lydia. So what happened on this day? What happened to Lydia that made it so significant that she was recorded in the Bible? So we're going to be looking at Lydia's response, and the ripples in the community that happened following that. So Lydia's response, we know that she was in this crowd. You can imagine all these women gathering, coming out of the city, sitting there. This guy, they heard, Paul came and he was talking. It was gathering lots of people. And she was sitting there as she normally did. And this regular rhythm. But what was so significant about that day was that she heard the good news of Jesus. She heard the good news of Jesus and she responded. You see, a response requires a listening ear and an action, doesn't it? You have to listen and you have to respond. So if I say to my kids, can you go and tidy your bedroom? They may listen, but they don't respond. They don't action it out. You see, a response calls for that. That's why they keep saying, come on, we do it together. Come on, let's tidy these bedrooms. A response requires us for a listening ear, but also action. You see, my mum started going to church when we were little, me and my two sisters, because a friend invited her. And then she brought the three girls, us, along with her. And we used to sit in Sunday school and hear all those Old Testament stories, you know, the ones, and take it all in. And when I was about 11, remember I said I was full of energy, so I got sent away to a little Pathfinder camp, as it was. You know, this would be good for me, lots of sport. And when I went there, in the evenings, they had a little talk every night. And they just wouldn't stop talking about Jesus, this character, Jesus. And I hadn't really heard about Jesus. You know, I'd heard about David and Goliath and all the heroes of the Old Testament. And it started to seep into me thinking, oh my goodness, I'm seeing everything in the Old Testament through the lens of Jesus. It came alive. I started to realize this person, Jesus, was real and here. It wasn't a story. It absolutely transformed me, and I gave my life to God there. You see, what's so significant in this passage is it says that God opened Lydia's heart, didn't it? God opened her heart so she could respond. And Lydia saw Jesus in the scriptures, these Hebrew scriptures that she'd learned over the years and responded to. And here she met this personal person, Jesus, and it was like all those bits of the puzzle connected. All the missing parts came together. And it was like, you know, you've ever done a puzzle and there's one missing. It was like, bang. The picture is completed here. It made sense to her. So what does it mean to have an open heart? Well, in our Western culture, we see, don't we? We separate our mind from our heart. I don't know about you. My mind is the logic one, the one that thinks, that processes, that analyzes things. And my heart's the one that gets hurt, that thinks, that has this emotion with it, and we separate them. But in the Bible, it talks about the heart connecting the mind and our emotions. The heart is everything about us, our whole identity, who we are, our character, our thinking, our logic, our emotions, our intentions, our aspirations. So what it's saying here is God opened Lydia, and she recognized who she was in Jesus. Her whole identity. Here's Lydia, the one that's got it all, but the one who's searching for that gap in her life. And God opens her heart and she responds. That means she listens and takes action. You see, worship from the heart takes our inner reality, everything that's in us, and turns it outwards as an expression of Jesus being poured out. And here we see Jesus connecting with Lydia. So how do we position ourselves to respond to God? How do we position ourselves that we have this open heart for God? Well, there's probably many things, but I just want to talk about listening today. What does it mean to listen to God? And I've been really challenged by this because I know in my head that I can listen to God anytime, any place, yeah? We know that. But what would happen if we had a daily, a weekly rhythm of listening to God? What would happen to our lives? And where would that place be? We know that Lydia went outside the city to the water. We know that Paul, in the beginning of the verses, he must have been listening because he knew not to go into a place or whether to go into a place. We know that Jesus went onto a mountainside and the disciples, they gathered in upper rooms. There was a place mentioned. So where is our place that we listen to God? Susan Wesley in 1669, I love Susanna Wesley. She was great. She had 19 children, 10 survived. A couple of her children was John Wesley, wasn't it? The mighty speaker that brought many to Christ. But also Charles Wesley that did over 9,000 hymns. That's the ones we know. And it says in her documents as you read it, that every day she used to put her apron over her head. And when her apron was over her head, the kids knew not to disturb her. And this was for more than an hour because this was her time of prayer. And as the kids grew up, it was written down in her diaries that no one disturbed her. She was praying and listening to God. Now, when my 4 kids were very little, you can imagine the chaos in the kitchen, cleaning, cooking, everything. So what I used to do is take off my shoes and my socks and walk barefoot in the kitchen because I couldn't do a lot. I was always in the kitchen. And as I was barefooted in the kitchen, it reminded me to think of God, to listen to him. And I used to call it my barefoot in the kitchen time with Jesus, listening. You see, this continued, and then a couple of years ago, as I was going through this ordination process, I used to think, I've got to do a bit more, if I'm going to stand up here. So I started doing this app. There's some great apps out there for listening to the Bible, Lectio Divina, lots of apps there, my Bible notes, reading through this, and I got into this routine, but it became a tick list, I don't know if anyone else has done that. I've done this, I've done that, I've done that. And the God said, no, it's not about ticking off things or doing. This is about Lou. It's about you being. And we know that being is a verb. It's a thing that we have to act out. This is about you being with me. Listening is about being in the presence of God. But I'm not very good at that, because I'm quite an active person. So I've been encouraged over the last few months to find a little place and hang out with Jesus. Hang out a little bit with Jesus. So about 5:30 or 6 in the morning, my household gets up really early. I just sit by this big window and I just sit there and hang out with Jesus. At first it was really hard. 30 seconds is all I could do, I have to put down all my distractions on a bit of paper. I have to just sit there and be, because I know that I was called just to sit and be. So 30 seconds, and it increased to 1 minute, and then a couple of minutes, and you can see. And then through those times, I'm often getting distracted, and I have to refocus myself. And there's many a time when I sit by that window being and trying to listen that I don't hear God very well, but I've been sitting in God's presence. But there are many times when I'm sitting and being that I get a word, or I get someone in my head that I've got to visit, or I know who to contact that day. And I get used to God being there every single morning as I tap in and listen and just be in his presence. And for me, that has been really helpful. I know we can listen to God as we're going on our dog walk or when we meet with others. But I think the Lord is calling us to have this regular rhythm of being in his presence, of listening, even if we can do 30 seconds, because that increases there. Just hang out with him. So Lydia got up, didn't she? She went outside the city and she just sat and listened. And God met with her. God met with her by the stream. Yeah. So the ripples in that pond we get, don't we? As a raindrop drops in that pond, you can't see it, but you can hear it. And that's what we got to tune into. Tune into Jesus speaking to us. We can't always see it or recognize it, but we start to tune into it. And as we see that ripple getting bigger and bigger and bigger, it was like Lydia, didn't she? What did she do from that place when she met Jesus? She ran back. The whole of her household got baptized. She brought people into her house. Obviously, her gifting was hospitality, and she started to use that gift in there. And Lydia was the start of the house church movement in that area. She was the start where people gathered and set up church in her house, just from that one person, from that one response. The ripple started, and as other people heard the voice of Jesus, those ripples started to overlap, and God was on the move. Now, Pete Gregg, the founder of the 24/7 prayer, when he started that up, someone came to him and said, "Pete, I don't get it. What's this vision about? Why is this so important?" And he had to stop and think. The vision is about Jesus, meeting with Jesus. He's dangerously, obsessively, and undeniably powerful. This guy named Jesus. And that's why we need to spend time in his presence. Think about it. If we all took time to just sit for a minute, listen to Jesus' voice, just think across this town, those ripples that would overlap into our community and Jesus break through. Let's just pray. Jeremy, would you like to come up for me? And Jeremy's going to play. And I thought it would be really good as we're talking about connecting in to Jesus. And it's really hard. You might think it's your mind speaking, and that's normal, you know. But Jesus is always speaking to us. And I'm going to just invite us to be quite quiet as we listen to the music. And I'll just do an opening prayer. And if you would like to, just, you know, I often have my hands open and just say, Jesus, come and speak to me now. And just be open. And you might just feel absolutely normal, and that's okay. But he might just give you a sense of his peace. He might pop a picture or a word. You might just feel his love upon your life. But that's what Jesus is like. He comes to us each individually and just connects with us. So as Jeremy's playing, I'll just say a prayer, and we're just going to have a time of listening. It doesn't matter about what's going on around us. Let's each individually connect.